According to Seth, dying may actually be easier than being born, and he should know. In his books, Seth claimed to have experienced physical death and birth, obviously, more times than he could remember. And he says one of your first surprises after death may be remarkably simple, just that I'm still here, that you haven't disappeared, you haven't lost your identity into the universe, you are literally still you. And strangely, you may actually begin to feel more like yourself than ever and not less. And later I'll explain why that particular idea resonates with me so strongly. Because I've been having out-of-body experiences, psychic experiences, since I was about 3 years old. That's about 55 years of exploring what it feels like to experience myself outside of normal physical focus. And across those experiences, one thing has remained remarkably consistent. I've never felt less myself, i.e., I've always felt more out of my body. But first, let's look at what Seth says about what happens when you die. One way of thinking about death is that you simply find yourself focused into a different reality, that you are still you. You still know who you are, you still retain memories of your physical life, you still love and are connected to the people that you loved. But your attention is no longer focused through the physical body, of course, or the five senses. Your physical life has not become meaningless in any way, shape or form. The relationships, the experiences that mattered to you, they still matter. Your focus has simply changed to bring in more information about yourself, about reality, your journey and the journey of others. And there's something very important that you bring with you as well, which is your beliefs. Death doesn't suddenly give you a perfect understanding of reality because you are still you. And you always create your experience in every environment, not just this one here. The body dies, of course, we remove our focus from it and the environment changes. Therefore, your means of perception changes completely, but the relationship between your beliefs and your experience, well, that continues. So Seth talks about if you enter this new environment with powerful beliefs, say about God or judgment or heaven or hell, for example, or what should happen after death, those beliefs can be played out as real experiences for us. They don't simply remain ideas. They can become part of the new reality that you're experiencing. From your perspective, why wouldn't you believe it? You've entered another environment and you've taken your beliefs with you. You're experiencing exactly what you expected to experience. And Seth's got some very interesting stories about that. But you're simply experiencing your own beliefs about reality. So you can leave the body, but you're not going to leave your worldview behind. And eventually you may notice that, hey, something doesn't quite fit, or you'll get help. Somebody who understands what's really happening may help you recognize the larger reality that you're now part of. And that's why exploring your beliefs while you're alive matters. You create your beliefs in all realities, not just this one. And in the Seth books, he talks about how in life, it's very helpful to expand your awareness outside of the body in dreams or out-of-body experiences because it makes the transition easier. Perhaps the simplest way to understand death is through something you experience every single night, which is that you fall asleep. Your attention is withdrawn, changed, turned away from the physical environment, away from the five senses and the physical brain. So the room disappears from your awareness, the body disappears from your awareness, from your understanding, your belief system. And then, of course, we've all had the experience that we wake up somewhere else. You're in what we call a dream, but that's actually another environment that your identity is creating. There may be people, there are things happening often. And while you're there, you may be so absorbed into the experience that you don't even question it. For that moment, in that experience, this is simply where you are. And then eventually you wake up. Your attention is turned away from that other reality, back through the physical senses, and here you are. Now imagine something slightly different, that you fall asleep, that physical focus is released. You become aware of another environment. You know that you are you within this environment, but this time you just don't focus back through the physical senses. And so in simple terms, that's one way of understanding death. You haven't stopped existing at all. Your focus has simply changed. Your awareness continues, your identity continues. You are still you, but it's no longer being channeled through the physical body and the five senses. So dying doesn't feel like I've ceased to exist. It actually feels much more like I've woken up somewhere else. albeit somewhere maybe unusual. What disappears is the physical focus, not the identity that was having and creating the experience. And that brings us to one of the biggest fears, of course, that people have about death. If I continue, will I still be me? Of course, this is one of the deepest fears about death, totally understandable. We don't only fear that we might stop existing, we fear that somehow we'll stop being ourselves with all the effort and time and energy we've put into being us. We think that individuality might disappear, that we're going to be absorbed into the universe. Perhaps we'll dissolve into some universal consciousness. But the picture that Seth describes is almost the opposite, and much more hopeful, if you like. You don't become less of yourself, you become more of yourself. And this is where my own experience becomes really relevant, hopefully to help you understand this, because this isn't simply an idea that I discovered in the Seth Material 30 years ago. I've experienced something like this since I was about 3 years old. Some of my earliest, most powerful memories are experiences outside of the normal physical body, and I never felt lost. I didn't feel as though I was disappearing in any way, shape or form. Even at that young age, I didn't feel less real. I actually felt more of myself. There was a sense of expansion and awareness of becoming larger, of becoming more myself, of having access to information I didn't seem to have in my normal waking state. And strangely, it felt extremely familiar. I felt very safe. Those experiences have continued throughout my own life, and so I've spent about 56 years now exploring out-of-body and psychic experiences like trance and channeling, and experiencing communicating with people who have physically died and some that have never been physical at all. I can't prove these to you, and I'm not asking you to accept these as proof. But one thing's become remarkably consistent with myself and other people that I've worked with. Leaving normal physical focus has never felt like losing anything. And when I've experienced communication with people who have died, I've had similar experiences. They have told me this. When I've done channeling, exactly the same. They're still themselves, the individuality is still there, the connection is still there, the personality is perfectly recognizable, but the perspective seems broader, deeper, and larger. And that's why Seth's descriptions resonated with me when I bumped into Seth Material, as I say, about 30 years ago. In important ways, I already recognized what he was describing, and it was reassuring that this actually followed what he was saying. And this helps explain, I hope, why death can feel like an expansion rather than a loss. While we're physically alive, the physical five senses give us an incredible intense focus into this reality. So it's understandable we fear going outside of it, but they're not the only senses that we have. Seth brings in the idea of other forms of perception called the inner senses. But for what we have time to explore here, the important point is pretty simple. Seth puts it this way: your physical senses are extensions of these inner methods of perception, and after death, it's upon these that you will rely. That's the key. When we move out of physical reality, these inner senses become our natural way of perceiving and communicating, and they don't have the same limitations of the physical senses being limited to time or space. They allow us to access much more information about ourselves and reality, and essentially more information about ourselves and our journey. Knowledge that seemed unavailable during the intense physical focus becomes accessible to us. Communication is much more direct. It becomes more cognitive knowing. Knowing becomes more immediate. And that's where this sense of expansion comes from. So your identity doesn't become suddenly larger. It's that your access to your existing identity has become larger. You're becoming aware of information and aspects of yourself that were there all along, but that physical focus largely excluded. This is something I've experienced to a lesser degree, but still pretty dramatic during out-of-body experiences and doing channeling. I'm still completely myself, but there is a noticeable expansion in what I can perceive about myself and reality, and what I can have access to. It's difficult to describe, to be honest, because we're trying to explain a form of perception that isn't primarily based on the five senses or sounds or words. So using language created within the physical reality is pretty tricky. But the feeling itself, the understanding, is unshakable and unmistakable. It's not I'm disappearing, It's much closer to, there's much more of me than I ever realised. And after death, rather than these inner senses appearing occasionally around the edges of physical perception, which is what we have now in intuition and psychic awareness, they become the natural tools through which you experience the reality that you are focused within. And this brings us to perhaps an essential and most important part of the model we're exploring, that you did not begin at birth. You didn't arrive here as an empty personality, a shell, and slowly construct an identity from everything that happened to you. You were already and remain a multidimensional, immortal identity before this physical life began. You are that identity during life. You remain that identity after physical death. So you never come into physical life empty, so to speak. You bring in biological latent knowledge, inner beliefs about purpose, desires about what you want to learn, intentions about the relationships you're going to have, abilities that want expanding, and directions for that in terms of your experience. You could think of these inner blueprints particularly important during the early years of physical life before we've created particular beliefs. Now, that doesn't mean that everything is predetermined, far from it. It means the physical personality emerges from an identity that already exists. So you didn't start here, and if birth wasn't the beginning of you, why would death be the end? This also helps the more you explore it, explain Seth's claim that death may be easier than birth. Birth requires an extraordinary narrowing focus of attention. You enter an intense sensory environment from a much broader one. You learn how to operate a body. You learn how to focus through physical senses. So in a way, you learn how to forget everything for the while that you are physical. So death doesn't turn you suddenly into a multidimensional being. It ends one particular focus within an identity that was multidimensional all along. And remember the dream analogy. It's the most useful one we have, and maybe the most reassuring. You may already be experiencing aspects of these other realities every night. When you withdraw your physical focus, you move into another state of consciousness that you create. You experience these other environments, and then you turn your focus back here. And where Seth talks about death, it involves something surprisingly familiar, except you just don't turn your attention back here. So perhaps death doesn't feel like we're entering somewhere completely alien, where we are unsafe and unfamiliar about who we are. There is, in fact, a strange familiarity to it. There's much less of where am I, and much more of course, I remember now. And Jane Roberts, in her own work, which is incredible, explored this from another angle. She wrote the After-Death Journal of an American philosopher. I've got it up there. And she presented this coming from the philosopher William James, his worldview after his death. It's a fascinating book. There's one line I particularly like, which is, there's a constant feeling that the universe is with me, for me, and with and for all the others at the same time. So he's not describing a conventional heaven. He's describing something much more fundamental, a full cognitive acceptance, an underlying condition of love, safety and support, a sense that reality is in itself is for us and we are supported by it. Not only do you perceive more, but your relationship with reality will of course change. Fears that we have, the separation that seems so natural here in physical reality falls away. That is my experience out of body also. And it's replaced with an extraordinary sense of familiarity, safety, and unconditional love. And the recognition as this is what reality is really like all along. And I think this is where all of this becomes most important, because understanding death isn't really just about understanding death, of course. It tells us something extraordinary about what we are, who we are, and what this place is right now. We possess these inner senses right now. Our identity is already multidimensional. And physical perception is just one intense focus of the identity that you are. So you have access to your inner senses. So why wait until death to explore more of yourself? That's been the heart of my own exploration for most of my life. And those experiences haven't made me want to escape physical reality. Quite the opposite. They've turned me towards the beauty and the opportunities within physical reality to know myself. They've made physical life more interesting. Because if there's far more to our identity than the five senses normally reveal, which there are, how much of it can we discover while we're here through our dreams, our intuition, our inner knowing, combining our awareness with our inner selves and having out-of-body experiences, waking up while we're here, I think that's what we're here to do. And exploring our beliefs, of course, because those beliefs don't just affect what happens to us here, we take them with us. So, of course, it's a really interesting and essential question to ask what happens to me after I die. But it's also, and I would say equally important, to think about how much of myself can I discover while I'm here in this particular reality, because death does not turn you into the multidimensional being. You're already one before birth, and this is what you're here to wake up to during your physical life. So I hope that's interesting. I hope maybe it's reassuring for you. Do comment below. Do let me know what you think. And because our beliefs are so important, I would encourage you to begin doing belief work. So you can download the Belief Blueprint. It's a training, and also there's email training and a trance journey to help you understand how to find, uncover, and change those limiting beliefs that we all have. If you found this useful, do consider subscribing to the channel. Do like the video. It helps me share these ideas into the world, and you might want to share it with somebody that might be interested as well. That's it. Take care.